My kids told me, "Come early, Mom, we're going to celebrate you." But when I arrived at that fancy restaurant, the waiter handed me a badge that said, "Limited guest." My daughter-in-law, Emily, whispered with a cruel smile, "That means no food, mother-in-law." My daughter just burst out laughing as if it were the funniest joke in the world. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because what happened next changed my life forever. I'm Catherine. I'm 65 years old, and my whole life, I was the perfect mother. The one who always said yes, the one who always forgave, the one who always sacrificed. I raised my children alone after their father died when they were teenagers. I worked double shifts at the textile factory, sold homemade food on weekends, and cleaned houses at night. All so that Emily and my son could go to college so they could have what I never had. Emily was always special, smart, ambitious, but also cold. Since she was little, she had this way of looking at me as if I were an obstacle on her path to something better. When she married Michael, I thought maybe motherhood would soften her. But Michael was worse than her, an arrogant man who worked in finance and always spoke to me as if I were an ignorant peasant. "Mom," Emily would say, every time she visited, "you don't understand how the modern world works. Let Michael handle your papers, he knows about these things." Michael would nod with that condescending smile I hated so much. "Mrs. Catherine, you've done enough. Now rest and let us take care of everything." But I wasn't the helpless old woman they thought I was. During all those years of sacrifice, I learned something my children never knew: the value of silence and patience. While they thought I only knew how to sew and cook, I invested every extra penny I earned. I bought small properties in neighborhoods I knew would grow. I saved in accounts they didn't know about. I built a fortune in secret because there was something in the way they looked at me that told me I would need it one day. Emily had a daughter, Sarah, my 8-year-old granddaughter. She was the only one who treated me with real love. When I visited, Sarah would run to hug me and whisper, "Grandma, Mommy says mean things about you when you're not here." Those words broke my heart, but they also prepared me for what was to come. The invitation came on a Tuesday. Emily called me with a strangely sweet voice. "Mom, we want to invite you to dinner tomorrow, something special. Come early. We're going to celebrate you." Michael shouted from the background, "Yes, Mrs. Catherine, we're finally going to celebrate properly." It gave me hope to think that maybe after so many years, my children finally valued me. I put on my prettiest green dress, the one I had saved for special occasions. I fixed my hair, put on a little perfume. I walked to that restaurant with a heart full of hope, thinking that maybe they were planning something beautiful for my upcoming birthday. Or maybe they wanted to apologize for all those years of indifference. When I arrived at the restaurant, it was one of those elegant places I had never been to. Sparkling glass white tablecloths, soft music. I felt proud that my children had chosen such a fine place to celebrate with me. I looked around and saw them at a large table laughing and chatting animatedly. I approached smiling, but something was wrong. The waiter intercepted me before I reached the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said with an uncomfortable smile. "Are you the special guest?" I told him yes, that I was Emily's mother. Then he handed me that laminated badge that said, "Limited guest." "What does this mean?" I asked, confused. The waiter looked towards the table where my children were and then whispered to me, "It means you can sit down, but you can't order food, ma'am. Only water." I felt as if I had been slapped. I looked towards the table and saw Emily laughing, covering her mouth with her hand, while Michael recorded everything with his phone. I approached the table with that humiliating badge hanging from my neck. Emily looked at me with eyes sparkling with malice and whispered just loud enough for Michael to hear, "That means no food, mother-in-law. I hope you ate before you came." Michael let out a laugh and said, "Oh, Mrs. Catherine, it's a joke." Always so dramatic. But it wasn't a joke. I saw in their eyes that they were enjoying every second of my humiliation. I sat in that chair feeling like a beggar in the midst of royalty. Emily and Michael continued their dinner as if nothing had happened, cutting their steaks, while I only had a glass of water in front of me. The aroma of the food tortured me, but what hurt the most was seeing how they enjoyed my suffering. "Mom," Emily said delicately, wiping her mouth with her napkin, "you must be wondering why we brought you here." Her voice had that coldness I knew so well, that way of speaking she used when she wanted to hurt me. Michael nodded as he chewed his eyes shining with cruel amusement. "You see," Emily continued, "Michael and I have been talking about your future. You're 65 now, you're alone in that old house, and frankly, we're worried you can't take care of yourself." She leaned forward, feigning concern. "We've found a very nice nursing home. Small, affordable, perfect for someone of your level." The world reeled around me. Michael put down his fork and looked at me with that smile I had learned to hate. "Mrs. Catherine, you've already fulfilled your purpose in life. You raised your children. Now it's time for you to rest. We'll take care of everything." He took some documents out of his briefcase and placed them in front of me. "We just need you to sign these little papers, nothing complicated." I looked at the documents in horror. They were property transfer papers, powers of attorney documents that would basically make me a legal pauper. My house, my savings, everything would pass into Emily's hands. "It's for your own good, Mom," my daughter insisted. "You don't understand investments or taxes. Michael is an expert in finance. He'll know what to do with everything. And don't worry," Michael added with false gentleness. "We'll give you a monthly allowance. $50 should be fine for your personal expenses. Right soap, toothpaste, things like that." Emily let out a little laugh. "Mom, you don't need more than that anymore. The home will give you food and a roof over your head." I felt anger rising in my chest like boiling lava. These two monsters, whom I had raised and loved, were planning to steal everything I had built, with decades of sacrifice. And worst of all, they were doing it with such calculated cruelty that it made me sick. "And what if I don't want to sign?" I asked in a trembling voice. Michael and Emily exchanged a knowing look. "Mom," Emily said in a soft but threatening voice, "do you really want to do this the hard way? We can have you declared mentally incompetent. Michael has contacts at the hospital doctors who can certify that you're not right in the head anymore." "Think about it, Mrs. Catherine," Michael added. "A woman your age living alone with no family to visit. It would be very easy to convince a judge that you need medical supervision." He leaned back in his chair, enjoying every word. "Or you can sign now voluntarily, and we'll make sure you have a peaceful old age." The waiter discreetly approached and placed the bill on the table. Michael looked at it and smiled maliciously. "Oh, what a shame, Mrs. Catherine. It seems we brought just enough money for our food. You can pay for your water." He pointed to my empty glass mockingly. "That'll be $2.50. Emily pretended to look in her purse. "Oh, Mom, I don't have any change either. What are we going to do?" The two of them looked at me, waiting for my total humiliation. They wanted to see me beg, pleading for them to help me with those miserable $2.50. But something changed in that moment. Maybe it was the way Michael savored every word of his threat, or the way Emily smiled when she mentioned the nursing home. Maybe it was the memory of all the nights I stayed up sewing to pay for their college, or all the times I ate beans so they could eat meat. I took out my phone, a simple model they always criticized. "What are you doing, Mom?" Emily asked with curiosity. "Are you going to call someone to lend you the $2? Michael let out a laugh. "Who is she going to call? She has no friends, no family, only us." I typed a text message, my fingers trembling not with fear, but with a cold fury I had never felt before. "Cancel everything. Immediately." I sent the message and put my phone away. Emily and Michael looked at me strangely, but they continued laughing to themselves, planning how they would spend my money. "You know what, Mom?" Emily said, leaning dangerously close to my face. "Maybe it's better if you know the whole truth. Michael and I have already been spending part of your inheritance. We bought a new car, remodeled the house, took a vacation in Europe. We figured since you're going to die soon anyway." She shrugged, as if she were talking about the weather. Michael nodded proudly. "We have the numbers calculated, Mrs. Catherine. Your little old house is worth about $20,000. You have about $5,000 in the bank, and with that we can pay off our debts and have a little extra to invest." He leaned forward. "You've been very useful without knowing it. And Sarah," Emily added cruelly, "we've told her that Grandma is sick in the head, that she says crazy things and it's better if she doesn't visit anymore. The poor girl doesn't even ask about you anymore." Those words were like daggers straight to my heart. I looked at my watch. 40 minutes had passed since I sent that text message. Michael was still talking about his plans for my money when his phone started to ring. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's the bank," he muttered. Why would the bank be calling me on a Wednesday night? He answered the call confidently. "Yes, this is Michael." His expression gradually changed from confidence to confusion, then to horror. "What do you mean, frozen? What does that mean?" His voice got louder. "That's impossible. I have authorization to use that account." Emily looked at him with growing panic. Michael hung up and immediately dialed another number. "It's the mortgage company," he explained nervously. His second call was even worse. "Canceled, but we just refinanced. Who has the authority to—" His voice broke. Michael's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Each call brought worse news. His credit card had been canceled, his checking account was frozen, and the loan they had used to buy the new car had been immediately revoked. Emily looked at him with panicked eyes as he desperately tried to understand what was happening. "This has to be a system error," Michael shouted, drawing the stares of the other diners. "I'm going to sue the bank." But even as he spoke, his voice sounded less convincing. The arrogant man who had threatened me minutes ago was now sweating and trembling like a frightened child. Emily grabbed her purse and took out her credit card. "I'll pay for dinner," she said, trying to sound calm. But when the waiter ran the card, the machine made that terrible sound we all know. Transaction denied. Emily turned pale. "It must be a technical problem. Try again." The waiter, visibly uncomfortable, tried 3 more times. Nothing. Emily took out another card, then another. All declined. Michael tried with his, but the result was the same. They were there in that elegant restaurant, unable to pay a $200 bill. "Mom," Emily said in a broken voice, "you know something about this." For the first time in years, she was speaking to me with respect, with fear. I looked her straight in the eye and smiled. A small smile, but enough for her to understand that this was no coincidence. "Me?" I asked with feigned innocence. "I'm just an ignorant old woman who doesn't understand modern finance. Remember—" Michael looked at me with a mixture of fury and terror. "What did you do, you witch?" he yelled. "What did you do?" The waiter approached nervously. "Excuse me, but I need you to settle the bill." Emily and Michael looked at each other desperately. They had no cash, all their cards were canceled, and I was still there sitting calmly with my limited guest badge. I took out my old worn wallet, the same one they had always looked at with pity. I placed exactly $2.50 on the table. "Here's the payment for my water," I said serenely. "As for your bill, well, as you said, you're finance experts. I'm sure you'll find a solution." I stood up to leave, but Emily grabbed my arm. "You can't leave us here." Her eyes were filled with tears of panic. "We're your family." Michael nodded desperately. "Mrs. Catherine, please. We can talk. We can fix this." I looked at both of them. These 2 people who had planned to steal everything from me and lock me away in a nursing home. "Family?" I asked softly. "The family that was going to give me $50 a month for toothpaste." I pulled my arm away from Emily's hand and walked towards the exit. "Mom, wait," Emily cried, running after me. "We can explain everything. It was just a joke." But I was already out of the restaurant. The last image I had was of the waiter talking on the phone, probably calling the manager to deal with an unpaid $200 bill. I walked 3 blocks to a small, familiar cafe. I sat at a corner table and ordered a cup of hot chocolate. While I waited, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized. "William, my lawyer." Yes, I had a lawyer, something my dear children never knew. "Mrs. Catherine," said William's familiar voice. "It's all done. The joint accounts have been closed, the cards canceled, and the loans that were secured with your properties have been immediately revoked. As you were the main guarantor, you had the legal right to withdraw your backing at any time." I smiled as I sipped my chocolate. "And Emily's house?" I asked. "Technically, it was yours, Mrs. Catherine. You put down the down payment and signed as a co-owner. By withdrawing your stake, they lost the ability to maintain the mortgage. The bank has already started foreclosure proceedings." William had been my lawyer for 15 years. I hired him when I started investing my first savings. He was a discreet, intelligent man who understood that a woman like me needed legal protection without drawing attention. For all these years, he had managed my investments, my properties, my secret bank accounts. "Do you want us to proceed with the next step?" William asked. There was a plan we had designed years ago in case my family ever tried to take advantage of me. I never thought I would have to use it, but that night at the restaurant showed me that I had been preparing for the right thing. "Not yet," I told him. "First, I want them to suffer a little to understand what it feels like to be helpless." William laughed softly. "You're smarter than they ever imagined, Mrs. Catherine." And when I hung up, I thought about all those years of pretending to be the submissive, ignorant mother. While they believed I only knew how to sew and cook, I had built a small but solid empire. 3 rental properties in the city center, an investment account that had grown steadily for 2 decades, and legal connections that protected me from exactly what had just happened. My phone rang again. It was Emily calling from the restaurant's phone. "Mom?" Her voice sounded broken. "Please help us. We can't pay the bill. They're going to call the police." In the background, I could hear Michael arguing with someone, his voice hysterical and desperate. "Emily," I said calmly, "do you remember what you told me an hour ago? That I had already fulfilled my purpose in life, and it was time for me to rest." There was silence on the other end. "Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Rest." "But we're your family," she cried. "You can't abandon us like this." And her hypocrisy was almost comical. "Abandon you?" I asked, "like you were going to abandon me in that nursing home with $50 a month." I hung up the phone and turned it off. That night I slept better than I had in years. For the first time in decades, I didn't worry about what my children thought of me. I didn't try to please them. I didn't pretend to be less intelligent than I was. I had taken off a mask I had worn for so long that I had almost forgotten who I really was. The next morning, William called me early. "Mrs. Catherine, I have some interesting news." His voice had that restrained excitement he used when he had discovered something important. "Last night, after what happened at the restaurant, I decided to dig a little deeper into your son-in-law, Michael's finances." "What did you find?" I asked, though something told me I wasn't going to like the answer. "Mrs. Catherine," William continued grimly, "Michael is not the financial expert he claims to be. In fact, he's involved in something much more serious." My heart started to beat faster. I found very suspicious bank transfers, money coming in and out of accounts and tax havens transactions that don't match his declared income. I sat on the edge of my bed trying to process the information. "What kind of transactions?" I asked. William sighed. "Money laundering, Mrs. Catherine. Michael has been using his job at the bank to launder money for criminal organizations. And worst of all, Emily knows." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My own daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much love, was involved in criminal activities. "How do you know?" I managed to ask in a trembling voice. "Emily appears as a beneficiary on several of the Shell accounts. She receives regular payments for consulting, but there are no records of any real work. She's receiving dirty money, Mrs. Catherine. That's why they needed your inheritance so desperately. It wasn't just greed, it was survival." The pieces started to fit together in my mind like a macabre puzzle. The new house, the luxury car, the European vacation Emily had mentioned so casually. It had all been bought with laundered money, and now they were in debt to dangerous people who don't accept excuses. "There's more," William continued. "Michael owes approximately $200,000 to an organization that doesn't forgive. He planned to use your inheritance to pay that debt and disappear from the country. He and Emily already had plane tickets for tomorrow night to the Cayman Islands." "They were going to flee?" I asked in disbelief. "And what was going to happen to me?" William paused for a long, painful moment. "Mrs. Catherine, according to the documents I found, you were going to have an accident after signing the papers. A slip in the bathroom, a fall down the stairs. Something that would look natural for a woman your age." The room started to spin. My own children had planned not only to rob me, but to murder me. The nursing home had been a cruel lie. They never intended to keep me alive once they got my money. "Do you have proof of all this?" I asked, surprised at how firm my voice sounded despite the emotional storm raging inside me. I have everything, Mrs. Catherine. Bank records, emails between Michael and his criminal contacts, text messages between him and Emily planning how to handle your situation. I even have recordings. Recordings? My heart stopped. Michael is careless with his phone. He leaves voice memos activated without realizing it. I have a complete conversation between him and Emily from 3 days ago, planning exactly how they were going to trick you that night and what to do afterwards. William sent the files to my phone. With trembling hands, I listened to the recordings. Michael's voice was clear and cold. Once the old woman signs the papers, we have to act fast. A domestic accident. Something simple. Emily, you can't be in the house when it happens. You need a solid alibi. My daughter's voice responded with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. And Sarah, my daughter is going to ask about her grandmother. Michael laughed. We'll tell her Grandma went on a long trip. Kids forget quickly. In a year, Sarah won't even remember she had a grandmother. I had to pause the recording because I was shaking so much I couldn't hold the phone. These monsters had planned to erase me from existence completely, not just to kill me, but to make my own granddaughter forget I had ever existed. Mrs. Catherine, William said softly when I had recovered enough to answer his call, there's something else you need to know. The men Michael owes money to are not going to wait long. According to my sources, they're already looking for him. Last night, when his accounts were frozen, Michael lost his only chance to pay. What does that mean? I asked, though a part of me already knew. It means they're in mortal danger, Mrs. Catherine. Those people don't forgive debts of $200,000. If they can't pay in the next 48 hours. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Michael and Emily were trapped between their own greed and the consequences of their crimes. They had dug their own grave trying to dig mine. What do you recommend we do? I asked. William thought for a moment. We have two options. We can turn all the evidence over to the authorities right now. The FBI, local police, the IRS. With what we have, Michael and Emily would go to prison for decades. And the second option, we wait. We let the situation unfold naturally. Michael must be desperate by now. He's probably trying to get money any way he can. And when desperate people do desperate things. He left the sentence hanging. I thought about everything I had heard. My children had not only planned to rob and kill me, but they had lived for years on blood money. They had corrupted everything I had built with honest work. William, I said finally, I want you to do something for me. Whatever you need, Mrs. Catherine. I want you to contact that criminal organization. There was silence on the other end. I'm sorry. You heard me correctly. I want you to let them know exactly where they can find Michael and Emily. Mrs. Catherine, William said in a worried voice, that could result in exactly what they planned for me, I interrupted. The difference is, they brought this on themselves. I was innocent. William sighed deeply. I understand your anger, Mrs. Catherine, but are you sure you want to get your hands dirty like that? His question made me think. Did I really want to become the same kind of monster they were? No, I said after a moment. You're right, but there's something else we can do. What do you have in mind? Let's play with them a little first. Let's make them feel exactly what it's like to be completely helpless. And then, when they've suffered enough, we'll turn the evidence over to the authorities. What specifically do you propose? William asked, and I could hear in his voice that he was intrigued by my plan. First, I want Sarah to be completely protected. She's innocent in all this and doesn't deserve to suffer for her parents' crimes. I've already taken care of that, William said. I have my best private detectives watching the girl 24/7. If anything happens to her, we'll know immediately. I felt relieved. Second, I want you to freeze their remaining personal accounts as well. Everything. So they can't even buy a piece of gum. Done! And third, I want the criminals Michael owes money to know that he's betraying them, that he's planning to flee the country without paying. William laughed softly. That's brilliant, Mrs. Catherine. It will put them in an impossible situation. Exactly. Now they can't run because the criminals will be watching them, but they can't stay either because they don't have the money to pay. I felt a cold, calculated satisfaction. They're going to feel exactly what I felt last night in that restaurant. Completely trapped, completely humiliated, completely helpless. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Visit my granddaughter Sarah at her school. William had assured me that the girl was being watched discreetly, but I needed to see her with my own eyes. I needed to remember why all this was worth it. I waited outside the elementary school until the bell rang. The children came running out as always, and there she was, my little 8-year-old Sarah with her pink backpack and messy pigtails. When she saw me, her little face lit up in a way that broke my heart. "Grandma Catherine," she shouted, running towards me. "Mommy said you were sick and couldn't visit me." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair that always smelled like strawberry shampoo. "I'm fine, my love. How's my princess?" Sarah looked at me with those big, innocent eyes that reminded me of Emily when she was little, before greed and evil corrupted her heart. "Grandma, Mommy, and Daddy have been acting really weird. They came home very late last night and were yelling a lot. Mommy was crying." My heart sped up. "What were they saying, my love?" Sarah shrugged. "Something about money and about you. Daddy was saying bad words I can't repeat, and Mommy kept saying it was all your fault." Of course it was my fault. It was my fault for being blind for so long, allowing these parasites to feed on my kindness. It was my fault for raising a daughter who could plan my death with such coldness. "Sarah," I said, kneeling down to her level, "would you like to stay with Grandma for a few days? We could make cookies, watch movies play in the park." Her eyes filled with excitement. "Yes, but I have to ask Mommy." "Don't worry about that, my love. Grandma already talked to Mommy." It was a lie, but a necessary one. I wasn't going to let this innocent child be hurt by the consequences of her parents' actions. I took Sarah to my house, the real house where I had lived all my life, not the small dwelling that Emily and Michael thought was all I had. My real house was a 2-story property in a quiet neighborhood fully paid for, with a backyard where Sarah could play safely. While Sarah played in the garden, I called William. "The girl is with me," I informed him. "Perfect," he replied, "and I have news about our friends. Michael didn't go to work today. According to my contacts at the bank, he called in sick, but the truth is he's afraid to leave his house." "Why?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Because the men he owes money to have been asking for him at his office, asking very aggressively. His boss is considering suspending him for bringing personal problems to work." I smiled as I watched Sarah swing happily. Everything was going exactly as we had planned. And Emily is completely hysterical. She tried to go to several banks today to apply for emergency loans, but her credit report is destroyed. She also tried to pawn her jewelry, but it turned out to be cheap fakes. That didn't surprise me. Michael had always been a man of appearances. He had probably bought fake jewelry to impress Emily, and she had been too naive or greedy to notice. "There's something else," William continued. "Emily went to your old house today, the house where you used to live. She was looking for something." "What was she looking for?" "Hidden money documents, anything of value that might have been left behind." But of course she didn't find anything useful, because there was nothing to find. I had been very careful all these years to keep my true assets completely separate from the life my children knew. They thought I was a poor widow living on a small pension. "William, have you contacted our friends from the underworld yet?" I asked carefully, knowing that there might be people listening. "Yes, Mrs. Catherine. I let them know that Michael is planning to disappear without fulfilling his obligations. I also gave them his current address and his daily routine." "How did they react?" "As expected. They weren't happy. They said Michael has until noon tomorrow to produce the full amount, or he will face the consequences. They also said that any attempt to flee would be considered a declaration of war." Perfect. Michael and Emily were now trapped in a cage of their own making. They couldn't run because they were being watched. They couldn't pay because they had no access to funds. And they couldn't seek help because no one else knew about their criminal activities. My phone rang. It was Emily. I decided to answer this time, curious to hear her level of desperation. "Mom." Her voice sounded hoarse, as if she had been crying for hours. "Do you have Sarah? Please tell me you have Sarah." "Sarah is perfectly safe," I replied coldly. "She's where she should have always been, with someone who truly loves her." "Mom, please. We need to talk. This has gotten out of control." Her voice broke. "Michael says dangerous people are looking for us." "Dangerous people?" I asked, feigning surprise. "What are you talking about, Emily?" "You know what I'm talking about. Somehow you found out about Michael's business." Her mask of innocence had finally fallen. "Ah," I said softly. "You mean the money laundering business? The $200,000 Michael owes to criminals? The plans you had to steal my inheritance and then kill me?" The silence on the other end was deafening. How do you know that?" Emily whispered. "I'm an ignorant old woman who doesn't understand modern finance, remember," I replied sarcastically. "But it turns out I do understand a few things, like the recordings where you plan my death." Emily started to sob. "Mom, please. It was just Michael. He made me do it. I never wanted to hurt you." Lies. I had the recordings where she actively participated in the planning, where she laughed at the idea of Sarah forgetting me after my death. "Emily," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "you and Michael had your chance last night at the restaurant. You had the chance to treat me with dignity, with respect, with love. Instead, you chose to humiliate and threaten me." "We can fix this," she cried desperately. "We can go to the police. We can confess everything. Michael can pay the money back." "With what money, Emily?" "With my money that you planned to steal." "Mom, those people are going to kill us." Her terror was palpable. "If we don't have the money by noon tomorrow, Michael says they're going to—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "They're going to do exactly what you planned to do to me," I finished for her. "Please," she begged. "I know you have money hidden away. We always knew you had more than you let on. Just lend us $200,000. We promise we'll pay you back." Her desperation was music to my ears. "You promise," I laughed. "Like you promised me a family dinner and instead gave me a limited guest badge. That was different." "Different how? Because this time you're the ones who need help." I heard Michael yelling something in the background. His voice sounded hysterical, terrified. "Emily," I continued, "let me ask you something. If the tables were turned, if I were begging you for help, what would you do?" There was a long pause. We both knew the answer. "Exactly," I said. "You would do exactly what you did last night. You would laugh at my suffering and tell me I had already fulfilled my purpose in life." "Mom, please at least think of Sarah. She's going to be an orphan." That was the last straw. Sarah is already being cared for by someone who truly loves her, someone who doesn't plan on using her innocence as a shield for criminal activities. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Outside, Sarah was still playing happily, completely oblivious to the unfolding drama. That child deserved better than criminal parents who used her as a manipulation tool. William called me an hour later. "Mrs. Catherine, there's movement. Michael just left his house with a suitcase. My men are following him." "Do you think he's trying to run?" "It's possible. Or maybe he's desperately trying to find money. Either way, our other friends are following him too. Michael has no idea he's being tracked by multiple groups." "Perfect. Let him make a mistake. Let him do something desperate that will completely seal his fate. And if he tries to hurt someone innocent in his desperation, that's why Sarah is with me, and that's why you have people watching him. Michael is a coward. When cowards get desperate, they usually only hurt themselves." That night, while Sarah slept peacefully in the guest room, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from unknown numbers, desperate text messages, even a video call attempt. All from Emily and Michael, increasingly hysterical, increasingly terrified. I decided to answer one of the calls to hear just how far their desperation had gone. It was Michael, and his voice sounded completely broken. "Mrs. Catherine, please listen to me. I know we did terrible things, but you don't understand the situation we're in." "I'm listening, Michael," I said coldly. "But make it quick. I have more important things to do." "Those people, the people I owe money to, they're not normal people. They're part of an organization that controls drug trafficking in the entire region. If I don't pay them tomorrow—" "Yes, I know," I interrupted. "They're going to kill you, just like you and Emily planned to kill me." "That was different," he shouted. "You're old. You've lived your life. We're young. We have a future." His audacity left me speechless. Even in his desperation, even begging for his life, Michael still believed my life was worth less than his. "Michael," I said with an icy calm, "you've just confirmed exactly why you deserve everything that's happening to you." "You can't let us die," he pleaded. "Think of Sarah. She needs her parents." "Sarah needs parents who aren't criminals," I replied. "Parents who don't plan murders for money." "I'll give you everything," Michael cried. "The house, the car, everything we have. Just help us escape the country." I laughed. "Everything you have, Michael, you have nothing. The house is mortgaged with my money. The car was bought with laundered money, and Emily's jewelry is fake. You literally have nothing of value." The silence on the other end told me he was finally understanding the magnitude of his situation. "Besides," I continued, "do you really think I'm going to help two people who recorded conversations planning my death, who described exactly how they were going to make it look like an accident? You heard those recordings." His voice broke completely. "Every word, Michael. Every detail of how you were going to kill me and make Sarah forget me. Every plan on how to spend my money after my funeral." Michael started to cry, a grown man sobbing like a child. "Please," he whimpered, "tell us what we have to do." "Anything. We'll get on our knees. We'll kiss your feet. We'll be your slaves." "Michael," I said softly, "there's something you and Emily never understood. Respect can't be bought with desperate pleas. Love can't be won back with empty promises. And trust, once broken like you broke, it cannot be repaired." "Then what do you want from us?" he screamed. "Do you want to see us die? Do you want Sarah to be left without parents?" "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to feel exactly what I felt last night in that restaurant. Helpless, humiliated, and betrayed by the people you trusted most." I hung up and turned off the phone, but my peace was short-lived. 20 minutes later, I heard noises outside my house. I looked out the window and saw Emily's car parked down the street. She and Michael were standing in front of my door, arguing in low voices. I immediately called William. "They're here," I whispered, "at my house." "My men are 2 minutes away," he assured me. "Are they armed?" "I don't know, but Michael is acting very erratically." The doorbell rang, then again. Then they started pounding on the door. "Mom!" Emily shouted. "We know you're in there. We saw the lights. We need to talk to you." Her voice had a hysterical note that made me nervous. Michael joined in the shouting. "Mrs. Catherine, we just want to get Sarah back. Give us back our daughter." It was a lie. If they really cared about Sarah, they wouldn't have exposed her to their criminal world in the first place. The pounding got louder. "Open the door!" Michael yelled. "We know you have money. We know you've been lying to us for years." His voice was getting more aggressive, more desperate. I quietly went upstairs to check that Sarah was still asleep. Thank God. The girl was a heavy sleeper and the shouting hadn't woken her. I went back downstairs and cautiously approached the window to see what they were doing. Michael was pacing back and forth like a caged animal talking on the phone to someone. His body language was that of a man on the verge of a mental breakdown. Emily was sitting on the steps, crying and pulling at her hair. My phone vibrated with a text from William. "My men are in position, but there's a problem. The others have arrived too. There are 3 cars with armed men parked on the surrounding streets. They're waiting." My blood ran cold. The criminals Michael owed money to had found my address. They probably followed Michael and Emily here. My house, the safe haven I had built for Sarah and me, was now surrounded by dangerous people. Another message from William. "Don't go out. Don't turn on any more lights. I'm calling the police." But I knew the police might take too long, and Michael in his desperation could do something stupid that would put Sarah in danger. Outside, Michael had finished his phone call and was now shouting louder. "Catherine, I know you're listening to me. Those people are here. They're waiting. If you don't give me the money now, they're going to come in and they're going to hurt Sarah." It was an empty threat. Michael had no control over those criminals, but I also knew that desperate men are unpredictable, and the presence of armed criminals near my house where my granddaughter was sleeping was unacceptable. I made a decision. I dialed the direct emergency number William had given me for extreme situations. "Code red," I said simply. "Understood," William replied. "In 3 minutes." Code red was our plan for extreme emergency situations. William had contacts in federal law enforcement people who could respond faster and with more force than the local police. It also meant we were going to reveal all our cards at once. Emily was now pounding on the door with both fists. "Mom, please just give us the money and we'll leave. I promise we'll never bother you again." Her promises were worthless. I had heard the recordings where she planned my death. Michael approached the living room window and tried to look inside. When he saw that I was watching him, his eyes filled with a desperate madness. "There she is," he shouted to Emily. "The old woman is in there. She's laughing at us." I wasn't laughing. I was calculating. I was planning. I was protecting my granddaughter from the monsters her parents had turned out to be. Michael started looking for something in the garden. He found a large rock and headed towards the window. "If you don't come out, I'm going to break this window," he yelled. "I'm going to come in and find that money myself." That was too far. I took out my phone and shouted loud enough for him to hear me. "Michael, if you break that window, I'm calling the police right now." "Call whoever you want," he replied in a broken voice. "Those people are going to kill me anyway. At least I'll get the money first." He raised the rock, and at that moment, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Multiple sirens approaching quickly. Michael froze with the rock in the air. Emily lifted her head, her eyes filled with terror. But the sirens weren't just from the police. I also heard the distinctive sound of federal vehicles, the kind I had heard in movies. William had kept his promise. The cavalry was coming. The criminals who had been waiting in the streets apparently also heard the sirens, because I saw car lights speeding away in all directions. Michael and Emily were now completely alone, surrounded with no possible escape. Michael dropped the rock and started running towards his car. But before he could get there, 3 police vehicles and 2 federal cars surrounded my property. Armed men got out quickly, wearing vests that said FBI and DEA. Emily collapsed on the steps, sobbing. Michael raised his hands, finally understanding that his nightmare was over. Not in the way he expected, but it was definitely over. The federal agents moved with military precision. Michael was immediately handcuffed, while he shouted about his rights and how it was all a misunderstanding. Emily tried to run towards the house, probably to get to Sarah, but she was stopped before she could climb the first step. "Mom!" Emily screamed as they handcuffed her. "Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we're your family." But I remained silent behind my window, watching as justice finally caught up with these 2 people who had planned my death. An FBI agent approached my door. He was an older, serious-looking man who identified himself as Agent Williams. "Mrs. Catherine, I'm with the FBI. Your lawyer contacted us with evidence of criminal activity. Are you safe?" I opened the door slowly. "I'm fine, Agent Williams. My granddaughter is sleeping upstairs. We should speak quietly." He nodded respectfully. "Of course, ma'am. We understand there is a minor in the house. She is the suspect's daughter." "Yes," I replied. "Sarah is 8 years old. She is completely innocent in all this." Agent Williams took notes. "Don't worry, ma'am. We have special protocols for minors. The child will be completely protected throughout the process." Outside, Michael was still shouting, "This is persecution. That crazy old woman is setting us up." His words only confirmed what the agents already knew about his character. Emily, on the other hand, had gone into complete shock. She was sitting in the back seat of the police car, staring into space. "Mrs. Catherine," Agent Williams continued, "your lawyer provided us with substantial evidence of money laundering, murder, planning, and conspiracy. Can you confirm that this evidence is authentic?" "Every word," I replied firmly. "I have the original recordings, the bank documents, everything." The agent nodded. We will need your full testimony, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, we want to secure the scene and protect the minor." He looked up where Sarah was still sleeping. "Does the child know anything about her parents' activities?" "Nothing," I assured him. "Sarah is a normal child who only knows that her parents have been weird lately. She has no idea about the money, the crimes, or the plans they had." "Perfect. That will make things easier for her." William arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by a social worker specializing in minors. The woman was kind and professional, exactly the type of person Sarah would need when she woke up and discovered her parents had been arrested. "Mrs. Catherine," William told me in private, "this is going to be big, very big. Michael wasn't just a small-time money launderer. He was part of an international network. The FBI has been investigating this organization for 3 years." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Michael and Emily are going to face very serious federal charges. Money laundering, conspiracy, murder planning. We're talking 20 to 30 years in prison minimum." I looked outside where Michael was still being questioned next to the police car. His arrogance had completely disappeared. Now he was just a scared man who finally understood the consequences of his actions. "And Emily?" I asked. "Emily is in a particularly bad situation," William replied, "because besides being an accomplice in the money laundering, we have clear evidence that she actively participated in the planning of your murder. That's attempted first-degree murder." The social worker approached us. "Mrs. Catherine, we need to talk about Sarah's temporary care. Would you be willing to be her temporary guardian while we resolve her parents' legal situation?" "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "Sarah is my granddaughter. It's where she should be." "Excellent. We'll do the paperwork tomorrow, but for tonight, Sarah can stay with you." Around 2 a.m, they finally took Michael and Emily away. Before leaving, Emily managed to shout one last thing. "Mom, please take care of Sarah. Tell her we love her." It was too little too late. Michael, on the other hand, shouted something completely different at me. "This isn't over, old woman. When I get out of prison, I'm going to—" But he didn't finish the sentence because one of the agents pushed him into the car. After everyone left, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, trying to process everything that had happened. In less than 48 hours, I had gone from being a humiliated mother in a restaurant to being responsible for sending my own children to prison. Did I feel guilty? A little. Did I regret it? Not at all. They had made their choices. They had chosen greed over love, crime over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. And they had planned to kill me for money. William called me early in the morning. "Mrs. Catherine, there are important developments. Michael is trying to make a deal with the FBI. He's offering information on the entire criminal network in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Emily is asking for a lawyer, but..." He paused. "She's also trying to blame you." "Blame me for what?" "She says you forced them to commit crimes by denying them access to your money, that it was all desperation caused by your cruelty." I laughed bitterly. Even arrested, handcuffed, facing decades in prison, Emily was still trying to manipulate the situation and blame others for her own decisions. "William," I said, "I want you to do one more thing for me." "Whatever you need, Mrs. Catherine." "I want to set up a trust fund for Sarah. All my money, all my properties, everything goes to her, but she can't access any of it until she's 25, and only if she proves to be a responsible and ethical person. And if Michael and Emily get out of prison, when they get out of prison," I corrected him, "they will find that they have nothing. No house, no money, no access to Sarah. They will have to start their lives from scratch, exactly as they wanted me to do." "It's poetic justice," William admitted. "But are you sure you want to completely disinherit Emily? She is your daughter after all." "Emily stopped being my daughter when she planned my death," I replied firmly. "Sarah is my family now. She is my future." When Sarah finally woke up around 9 a.m, she came downstairs in her pajamas, yawning and rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, Grandma," she said with that innocent smile that melted my heart. "Where are Mommy and Daddy?" I knelt down to her level. I had practiced this moment in my mind, but it was still difficult. My love, Mommy and Daddy had to go away for a while. They're going to be working in a place where they can't have visitors. Like when Daddy goes on business trips, Sarah asked. Something like that, my love, but it's going to be a very long trip. In the meantime, you're going to stay with Grandma. Is that okay? Her eyes lit up. Forever. Forever. I confirmed. Sarah hugged me tightly. Yay! I always wanted to live with you, Grandma. I feel safe here. Her words confirmed that I had made the right decision. This child had been living in a toxic environment without even knowing it. That afternoon, while Sarah was playing in the backyard, I received an unexpected call. It was Agent Williams. Mrs. Catherine, I have important news. The information your lawyer provided has resulted in the arrest of 12 more people in 3 different states. 12 people. Michael was part of something much bigger than we thought. His money laundering operation was connected to drug trafficking, human trafficking, and international bank fraud. I sat down heavily. And all this was happening while they were coming to my house for dinner on Sundays. Apparently, yes. Michael had been using Emily as a liaison with other criminals. She knew more people than she's admitting. The agent paused. Mrs. Catherine, you didn't just save yourself from being murdered. You helped dismantle a major criminal network. 3 weeks after the arrest, I was subpoenaed to testify before a federal grand jury. It was the first time I had ever set foot in a courtroom, and I must admit I was nervous. But when I saw Michael and Emily in handcuffs dressed in orange prison jumpsuits, all my anxiety transformed into a cold determination. Michael had lost a lot of weight. His hair was disheveled, and he had deep dark circles under his eyes. The arrogance that had defined his personality had been replaced by the look of a cornered animal. Emily looked even worse. She had been crying so much that her eyes were permanently swollen and red. The federal prosecutor, a man named Daniels, walked me through my testimony. Mrs. Catherine, can you tell us what happened on the night of March 17th at La Esperanza restaurant? I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. I described the humiliation of the limited guest badge, the threats of putting me in a nursing home, the documents they wanted me to sign. I talked about the recordings where they planned my death, about the laundered money they had been spending, about how they had pushed Sarah away from me. When I got to the part where Michael yelled, "That crazy old woman is setting us up," several members of the jury exchanged looks of disgust. Michael seemed to shrink in his chair. Mrs. Catherine, the prosecutor continued, at any point during these threats did you fear for your life? Absolutely, I replied. When I heard the recordings where they described exactly how they were going to make my death look like an accident, I realized I wasn't dealing with my family. I was dealing with potential murderers. Michael's defense attorney, a nervous man who clearly knew he had a losing case, tried to discredit my testimony. Mrs. Catherine, isn't it true that you deliberately misled your family about your true financial situation? Yes, I answered honestly. I kept my finances private. And isn't it true that this privacy led your family to mistakenly believe that you needed help? No, I replied firmly. My privacy did not lead them to plan my murder. Their greed led them to plan my murder. The lawyer tried another tactic. Isn't it possible that the conversations you recorded were taken out of context, that they were fantasies with no real intent? I sat up a little straighter in my seat. Counselor, do you consider planning how to make a person's death look like an accident, a normal fantasy? The jury chuckled quietly. The defense attorney turned red and asked no more questions. When it was Emily's turn, her lawyer tried to portray her as a victim of Michael. My client was manipulated by an older, more sophisticated man, she argued. She never would have participated in these activities of her own volition. But the prosecutor had a devastating surprise prepared. Your Honor, I would like to play recording number 7. It was a conversation between Emily and Michael that I hadn't heard before. In it, Emily not only participated in the planning of my death, but she suggested specific methods. We could push her down the stairs, Emily's voice said clearly. Or maybe something with medication. At her age, no one would suspect. Michael responded, I like the way you think, my love. That's why I love you. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Emily began to sob, but her tears no longer generated sympathy. The members of the jury looked at her with horror and disgust. After my testimony, Agent Williams took me aside. "Mrs. Catherine, there's something else you need to know. We've found evidence that Michael and Emily are not first-timers at this." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "We've been investigating the death of Emily's first husband, Sarah's biological father." The world reeled around me. Sarah's father died 5 years ago in what was classified as a car accident. But now, with everything we know about Michael and Emily's methods— "You think they killed him?" I whispered. "We're reopening the case. Michael had significant debts at the time, and Emily inherited a considerable life insurance policy." I sat down heavily in a chair in the hallway. "Does Sarah know any of this?" "There's no evidence that the child knows anything. But Mrs. Catherine, this means that Sarah is not only better off with you because of the current circumstances, you may have saved her life." The implications hit me like a hammer. If Emily had killed her first husband for money, what would have stopped her from harming Sarah if the child had ever gotten in her way? That night, as Sarah did her homework at the kitchen table, I watched her with new eyes. This child hadn't just lost her criminal parents. She had escaped from murderers living in her own home. "Grandma," Sarah said, looking up from her math, "do you think Mommy and Daddy are coming back soon?" It was a question she asked me at least once a week. It was getting harder and harder to answer. "My love," I said, sitting down beside her, "you're happy here with me, right?" Sarah smiled. "Super happy. There's no yelling here, no fights, and there's always yummy food. Besides, you always have time for me." Her words broke my heart and filled me with fury at the same time. This child had been living in an environment of violence and neglect and considered it normal until she experienced something different. 2 days later, William called with the final news. "Mrs. Catherine, they both pleaded guilty." Both. Michael accepted a deal, 30 years with no possibility of parole for 20 years. Emily received 25 years also with no parole for 20 years. I did the math in my head. Michael would be almost 70 when he got out of prison. Emily would be 55. Sarah would be a grown woman of 28 with her own established life. Essentially, my children had disappeared from our lives forever. "Did they ask to see you?" I asked. Michael requested a meeting. He wants to apologize and explain his actions. I laughed bitterly. "And Emily is blaming everyone but herself. She says prison is very hard, the food is terrible, and the other inmates bother her." "I'm not interested in seeing them," I said firmly. They both had multiple opportunities to change course. They chose the path that led them here. And if Sarah wants to see them when she's older, that will be Sarah's decision when she's old enough to fully understand who her parents are and what they did. The investigation also revealed that Michael had been stealing money from the bank where he worked. The total of his financial crimes exceeded $2 million. Emily had been receiving dirty money for 3 years, money she used to buy designer clothes, fake jewelry, and luxury vacations, all while treating me like a burden, like a useless old woman who didn't understand the modern world. The most satisfying moment came when the bank seized all the assets that Michael and Emily had purchased with stolen or laundered money. The house, the car, the jewelry, everything was confiscated. They were left with absolutely nothing, exactly as they had planned to do to me. The final irony was that the money recovered from their bank accounts and seized assets wasn't even enough to pay their legal debts. Michael and Emily would not only go to prison for decades, but they would come out completely broke. 6 months after the trial, Sarah and I had established a beautiful routine. Every morning we had breakfast together while she told me about her dreams from the night before. Every afternoon after school we did homework together and then cooked dinner. On weekends we explored the city, visited museums, went to the park. For the first time in decades, I felt truly alive. Sarah's transformation had been extraordinary. The shy, nervous child I had rescued from a toxic home had become a confident little girl full of curiosity and joy. Her grades had improved dramatically, she had made new friends, and at night she slept peacefully without nightmares. "Grandma," she said one morning while eating her cereal, "do you think I'm a bad person because I don't miss Mommy and Daddy very much?" The question broke my heart. "My love, you're not bad. You're a smart girl who knows how to recognize when she's in a safe and loving place. It's just that I feel different here, Sarah continued. Like I can be myself without being afraid of doing something wrong. Her words confirmed what I had suspected. Sarah had been walking on eggshells in her own home, trying not to upset parents who were too busy with their crimes to love her properly. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was the director of a local charitable foundation. Mrs. Catherine, we've heard about your story. We were wondering if you would be interested in collaborating with us on a special project. What kind of project? I asked with curiosity. We want to create a program for seniors who have been victims of family or financial abuse. A place where they can receive legal advice, emotional support, and help to rebuild their lives. The idea excited me immediately. What would you need from me? Your story. Mrs. Catherine, your experience. And if you're willing, we would like you to be the director of the program. You showed that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and rebuild your life. I accepted without hesitation. I had found my purpose. To help other seniors who were going through the same thing I had gone through. People who had been underestimated, manipulated, or abused by their own families. The New Beginnings program opened its doors 3 months later. In the first month, we helped 15 people. Older men and women who had been scammed by their children, threatened by their grandchildren, or tricked into signing documents that left them with nothing. Each story reminded me why I had made the decisions I did. Each person we helped regain their dignity and their rights validated the toughness I had shown with Michael and Emily. One of our first clients was a woman named Naomi, 72, whose son had kicked her out of her own house after forcing her to transfer the property to him. Mrs. Catherine, she told me crying, my son told me I had already fulfilled my purpose in life and it was time for me to step aside. The exact same words Michael had told me. Naomi, I replied, taking her hands. Your purpose in life is not defined by any ungrateful child. Your purpose is defined by you. With William's help, we got Naomi's house back, and her son faced charges for elder fraud. Sarah became the unofficial mascot of the program. After school, she would come to the office and help by organizing papers, serving coffee to visitors, and simply being the light that many of our clients needed to see. A happy, confident child who reminded them that families could be sources of love, not pain. My grandma says we all deserve respect, Sarah would explain to the visitors with that simple wisdom that children have, no matter how old we are. Her words often made our clients cry, but they were tears of hope. A year after the sentencing, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Emily. William had warned me that she would probably try to contact me, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. Dear Mom, the letter began. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you will at least read this. Prison has given me time to reflect on everything I did wrong. I realize now that I was a terrible daughter, a negligent mother, and a selfish person. I continued reading, curious to see if there was genuine remorse, or if it was another manipulation. Michael convinced me to do things I knew were wrong, but that's no excuse. I made my own decisions. I chose greed over love. I chose easy money over honest work. And I almost chose murder over family. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing all her mistakes and asking for forgiveness. It ended with, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to allow me to be a part of Sarah's life. I just hope you know that I finally understand the damage I caused and that I live with that guilt every day. I read the letter twice. Then I put it away in a drawer. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe it was another manipulation. It didn't matter. The damage had been done, the decisions had been made, and the consequences were permanent. Michael also sent a letter, but I threw it away without reading it. I had no interest in hearing excuses from a man who had recorded his voice planning my death and then yelled at me that I was a crazy old woman when he was arrested. 2 years after the trial, Sarah turned 10. We threw a party in the backyard, invited her friends from school, and celebrated the life we had built together. As I watched Sarah laugh and play with her friends, I thought about everything we had gained by losing Michael and Emily. Peace, security, genuine love, mutual respect, A relationship based on honesty instead of manipulation. "Grandma," Sarah said that night as I tucked her in, "do you think Mommy and Daddy are okay where they are?" It was a question I knew would come eventually. "I think they're learning my love, learning that choices have consequences." "And do you think I'll ever want to see them?" "I don't know, Sarah. When you're older, you will decide if you want to know the whole story and if you want to try to have a relationship with them. But always remember that you deserve to be loved and respected no matter what." "I know," Sarah said, hugging me. "You taught me that." In my 5th year running New Beginnings, we had helped over 200 seniors reclaim their rights, their properties, and their dignity. The program had expanded to 3 cities, and we had inspired similar programs in other states. A reporter from the local newspaper wanted to do a story on my story. During the interview, he asked me, "Mrs. Catherine, do you regret being so hard on your children?" "No," I replied without hesitation. "I regret not being harder sooner. If I had set clear boundaries from the beginning, maybe they never would have gone so far down their criminal path." What would you say to other seniors who are being mistreated by their families? That their age does not make them less valuable, that their love for their family does not obligate them to tolerate abuse, and that it is never too late to stand up for yourself and demand respect. Sarah, now 13, had decided she wanted to be a lawyer like William to help vulnerable people. "I want to protect grandparents, like you protected me," she explained. The night before I turned 70, Sarah gave me a letter she had written for me. "Dear Grandma," it said, "thank you for saving me from a life I didn't know was bad until I experienced a good one. Thank you for teaching me that real love doesn't hurt, doesn't threaten, and doesn't manipulate. Thank you for showing me that being strong doesn't mean being cruel, and that being kind doesn't mean being weak." The letter ended with, "When I grow up, I want to be exactly like you, brave, smart, and willing to fight for what is right, no matter how hard it is." That night, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that the most perfect revenge hadn't been sending Michael and Emily to prison. The most perfect revenge had been building a life so full of love, purpose, and joy that their absence was a blessing rather than a loss. And you who have heard my story to the end, tell me, have you ever experienced an injustice like this? Have you had to make difficult decisions to protect those you love? Tell me in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to find the strength to stand up for themselves. Because in the end, the most important lesson I learned is this: never let anyone, not even your own family, treat you as if you are less than what you are. Your value does not diminish with age. Your wisdom does not become obsolete, and your right to respect and dignity is unbreakable. Sometimes the most loving act you can do is to say no more and stand your ground no matter the consequences. 5 years after that terrible day at the restaurant, I find myself sitting in my office at New Beginnings, reviewing the cases for the month. At 75, my energy is still the same, but now I have a motivation I never had before. Every day I can help someone who is going through what I went through. Sarah, now 18, is about to graduate from high school with honors. She was accepted into the state university with a full scholarship to study law. Her admission essay was titled, "The Woman Who Taught Me That True Love Protects." And when I read it, I cried with pride for an hour. This morning I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was the warden of the state prison where Emily is serving her sentence. "Mrs. Catherine, your daughter has been requesting a visit for the past 6 months. She has completed multiple rehabilitation programs, and the prison psychologist says she has shown genuine remorse." After 5 years of total silence, the idea of seeing Emily filled me with conflicting feelings. "What programs has she completed?" I asked. "Therapy for manipulators classes on domestic violence, personal responsibility programs, and she's working as a tutor for other illiterate inmates. Maybe it's real this time. Maybe 5 years in prison had really changed the woman who once planned my death." "Let me think about it," I told the warden. "I'll give you an answer next week." And that afternoon, as Sarah and I prepared dinner together, I told her about the call. Sarah, now a mature and thoughtful young woman, listened to me in silence. "How do you feel about it, Grandma?" she asked me. "Curious," I admitted. 5 years is a long time. People can change, but I also know that some people just learn to manipulate better. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. What if we went together? Not to reconcile, but to close that chapter for good. The idea surprised me. You want to see your mother? I want to see what she has become. I want to ask her why she thought it was okay to plan to kill my grandmother. And I want her to know who I am now, the person I became without her influence. A week later, Sarah and I drove to the state prison. It was a gray, depressing building surrounded by wire and watchtowers. As we waited in the visiting room, I watched the other families. Some seemed hopeful, others simply resigned. When they brought Emily out, I almost didn't recognize her. She had lost a lot of weight, her hair was completely gray, and she was wearing glasses. But what struck me the most was her expression. She no longer had that arrogance that had defined her personality. She seemed humble. "Mom," she said in a broken voice as she sat down across from us. "Sarah." Her eyes filled with tears as she saw her daughter. "Look how beautiful you've become." Sarah watched her with scientific curiosity, as if she were studying a rare specimen. "Hello, Emily," I said deliberately, using her name instead of calling her daughter. "The warden says you've been taking classes." Emily nodded nervously. "Yes, classes about what I did to you, about why I was so blind for so long." "Tell us what you learned," Sarah said with a maturity that filled me with pride. Emily took a deep breath. "I learned that the victims of my greed weren't just you. I was a victim of my own need to have more to impress others, to live a life I couldn't honestly afford." "And Michael?" I asked. "Are you still blaming him?" "Michael was my accomplice, not my leader," Emily admitted. "I made my own choices. I chose money over family. I participated in planning your death." The word came out as a whisper. Sarah leaned forward. "What did you feel when you were planning to hurt my grandmother?" It was a direct and brutal question. Emily covered her face with her hands. "Nothing. I felt nothing. And that's what terrifies me the most now, that I could plan something so horrible without feeling guilt." "And now," Sarah insisted. "Now I feel everything," Emily replied. "Guilt, shame, horror at what I almost did. But also gratitude that I didn't succeed. Gratitude that you are alive and safe." I asked her about the other crimes, about the money laundering, about Emily's first husband. She confessed everything. Her first marriage had been for money, and when her husband threatened to divorce her after discovering her excessive spending, she and Michael had sabotaged his car. "We were monsters," she said simply. "Murderers for greed." "And Sarah," she addressed her daughter, "you were next on the list if you ever got in our way." Sarah remained unfazed. "I know Grandma saved my life in many ways," she replied. "Not just physically, but emotionally. She taught me what real love is." After 2 hours, we prepared to leave. "Will you come back?" Emily asked hopefully. Sarah and I exchanged glances. "No," I said firmly. "This visit was to close this chapter, not to open a new one." "I understand," Emily said, and for the first time in years, she seemed genuinely sincere. I just want you to know that every day I work to be a person who deserves your forgiveness, even if I never receive it." On the way back, Sarah was silent for an hour. Finally, she spoke. "I'm glad I saw her." "Why?" "Because it confirmed that you made the right decision. That woman we saw today is not my mother. You are my mother, Grandma." That night, as I reflected on the visit, I realized that seeing Emily had been liberating in an unexpected way. She was no longer the monster of my nightmares, but she was also not my daughter. She was simply a woman who had made terrible choices and was now living with the consequences. The following week, New Beginnings received an anonymous donation of $100,000. The letter accompanying the donation read, "To honor a brave woman who stood up for herself and saved her granddaughter." We never found out who sent it, but I suspect it was someone whose story was similar to mine. Today, as I write these final words, Sarah is packing to go to college. In a few weeks, for the first time in years, I will be alone in my house. But I don't feel alone. I feel complete. I have built a legacy of strength, justice, and unconditional love. I have shown that age does not mean weakness, that kindness does not mean being a victim, and that sometimes the most loving act is to say, "No more," and stand your ground. My story ended up being the exact opposite of what Michael and Emily planned. Instead of dying, forgotten, and robbed, I lived to protect others and be remembered as a woman who refused to be a victim, and that I believe is the sweetest victory of all.